Welcome to another New Africa Profile broadcast. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Now let's get down to the business of Africa. Decisions cannot be of a better quality than the information upon which they are based. The business of governance in Africa is no exception. So the question for this episode is, are Chinese sovereign loans to Africa beneficial or damaging? Let me start by saying in 2018, Africa was estimated to owe 417 billion US dollars. Now this is extremely high and rising rapidly. As a proportion of our GDP and of our total export earnings, it's the highest of any developing region. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, set a target threshold of 55% debt to GDP for developing economies, but by 2017, 19 African countries had exceeded 60% and 24 others over 55%. Surpassing the IMF target threshold means vulnerability to economic changes, reduced ability to respond to possible recessionary conditions, and most importantly, the probability of a calamitous default on repayments. Now, debt is a global issue, and the most indebted nations owe much more than the Africans. However, those economies have strategic and technological leverage and industry structures also to better respond to and survive unstable or adverse economic conditions. In recent years, African countries have increased their borrowing from China. The Jubilee Debt Campaign records that African countries owed China $10 billion in 2010. This had increased to over $30 billion by 2016. In 2018, commitments of a further $60 billion were made at the FOCAC conference in Beijing, and it is fair to say the 2020 debts of China to China will be substantially higher. Now, it's estimated that 20% of African debt is owed to China, and at least 20 countries are already at a high risk of debt distress. Let me give you a few examples of African indebtedness to China. China's debts are mostly placed with resource-rich countries. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo owes $3.4 billion to China and has agreed to exchange mineral resources for these loans. The Congo is rich in diamonds, gold, copper, timber, oil, and it mines 60% of the global supply of cobalt. In exchange for access to 5% of Ghana's bauxite, which is a crucial source of aluminium by Chinese state-owned hydropower and construction company Sinohydro, China announced an additional $2 billion infrastructure financing. This is part of a wider loan facility to Ghana worth $19 billion. Now, China's generosity to Ghana when negotiating this loan included gifting 100 vehicles to the Ghana Police Service and tens of millions of dollars in grants and debt write-off. The Nigerian economy is the continent's largest and has not gone unnoticed by China. Nigeria's debt to China was stated as $3.1 billion, which is just 4% of its total public debt. However, this is the largest amount it owes to any single country. Needless to say, Nigeria has become an important source of Chinese oil and petroleum, and also a strategic partner with China on economic, military, and even political issues. Let's look at Cameroon. Cameroon owes $5.7 billion to China according to the Autonomous Sinking Fund. That's the public entity that manages Cameroon's external debt. And Cameroon already defaulted on $78 million in 2018, a payment which China wrote off only last year. Now, talking about Zambia, it's one of the most indebted African nations with an estimated 6 billion worth of debt owed to China. Now, it is Africa's second largest producer of copper and could lose state-owned assets such as the power producer ZESCO to the Chinese if it defaults. The Chinese government has financed efforts to extract Sudanese oil, and in 2018, Sudan's debt to China was estimated at 10 billion, a fifth of its foreign debt. China agreed to restructure the Republic of Congo's 2.7 billion debt in May 2019, and this was to satisfy an IMF precondition to assisting the country with further funding. Kenya owes China an estimated 7.9 billion. A leaked copy of the contract for the construction of the Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway mega project shows that the country could lose the Mombasa seaport to the Chinese government if the National Railway Corporation defaults. Beijing accounts for nearly half of Ethiopia's external debt, and by 2018 had lent at least 13.7 billion to fund a $3.4 billion railway project connecting Ethiopia to Djibouti. The construction of Ethiopia's 6-lane highway, their metro system, and a number of skyscrapers in Addis Ababa. Angola owes 22.8 billion to China. Despite being the second largest producer of oil in Africa behind Nigeria, most of its precious natural resource goes towards repaying Chinese debt. However, none of the facts presented is definitive proof that Chinese loans are not in Africa's interests. Loans from China appear to be much cheaper and easier to obtain. Compared to institutional lenders like the IMF, like the World Bank or Paris Club, fewer questions are asked and the conditions attached are less onerous. So, the Chinese proposition is irresistible to African administrations struggling with low foreign reserves, weak currencies, low export earnings, budget deficits, and sometimes poor credit ratings. Also, and to be fair, China's commitment to providing loans for large-scale projects to a continent that suffers from severe lack of infrastructure and dire need for modern transport links is commendable and needful. So, if the needs are there and the funds are available, why is there such an outcry about Chinese money in Africa? For starters, debt levels as high as this will impede public investment in infrastructure and human development. It will also deter private investment. Put simply, not good. Secondly, critics say loans to Africa have grown tenfold in the 5 years to 2017 and are unsustainable. Clearly, they are easily taken but not easily repaid, and 40% of African nations are already at high risk of debt distress. Also, Chinese loans may be relatively easy to obtain, but they always have non-negotiable stipulations that each government must guarantee all loans, even the private ones. If obligations under the loans are not fulfilled, there are dire, serious consequences. Another concern is that Chinese loans often fund white elephant vanity projects that are for the elite rather than in the public good. A presidential office complex was built in Mozambique, a parliament building constructed in the Republic of Congo, and buildings for the president and ministers in Uganda, all of these with Chinese funding. Now, such projects are often not economically viable and are de facto bribery. A data research lab at the College of William and Mary reviewed 3,000 projects funded by Chinese loans in Africa and found many were in the regions where African leaders or their spouses were born. I shall say no more. Now, China also stands accused of using debt trap diplomacy to create a new world economic order. In short, a land grab. This may not appear to make any sense till we consider that China has more than 20% of the entire world's population, but only 9% of its arable land and a mere 6% of its water. Africa, on the other hand, has the planet's largest expanses of underutilized land, a preponderance of water and of mineral resources. If this is really the agenda of the Chinese, how could they hope to achieve it? Some observers suggest it would be by pumping large loans into Africa with the explicit purpose of leveraging the resultant debt to influence national policies and gain control over strategic assets and resources. A good example is Zambia's escalating debt to the Asian superpower that has led to rumors of a loss to China of control of its power generating company and seaport. Another example is the DRC's exchange of its precious, invaluable mineral resources for Chinese debt settlement. Yet another is China's lien over Kenya's mega railway project and its increasing economic, political, and military influence in Nigeria, leveraged on new loans to the regional power. Another challenge to Chinese loans in Africa can be summed up in one word: corruption. An independent audit of a China loan-sponsored upgrade to a Zimbabwean public works system revealed budget inconsistencies and concerns over kickbacks tied to funds that had been spent. In 2015, the book The Looting Machine, the journalist Tom Burgess catalogued how endemic corruption has fueled theft in Africa. His focus, the activities of China's Sonangol International. The multinational group has acted as a middleman in oil, gas, mining, and real estate deals between China and Nigeria and Angola, and the deals were often secretive and untrackable. The Carter Center, an international non-governmental organization, concluded in 2017 that more than half of $1.2 billion of Chinese funding to the DRC had gone missing. This was meant to be money loaned for the Psycho Mines project, and there was no evidence that money had been disbursed appropriately. Kenya, 3.2 billion standard gauge railway projects were financed, built, and managed by China. In August 2018, Reuters reported that 14 officials had been arrested over corruption and had been charged with defrauding the government. Well, recently the UK, Ireland, Finland, Sweden, they froze aid to Zambia following an investigation into large-scale corruption in a social cash transfer program. The list is truly endless, and it all is summed up in one word: corruption. For balance and fairness, I must say something about China's response to these allegations. Xi Jinping is General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. He's chairman of the Central Military Commission and president of the People's Republic of China. If anyone has something to say on this matter, he does. Now, speaking in 2018 at the China-Africa Forum, he asserted that China endeavors not to prescribe how Africa develops, nor meddle in African internal affairs, nor attach strings to African opportunities. Really? I mean, really? What about the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation and the 53 out of 53 African member states? What about that, Z? FOCAC's objectives are political, they are cultural, they are economic and security cooperation with Africa. Even its website says so. And if that is not influence and involvement, what is? And what stronger strings can be attached to opportunities, in quotes, than making recipients guarantee loans using the nation's assets and mineral resources as collateral? You exchanged $20 billion alone to Guinea for nearly 20 years of access to its bauxite ore. That is a clear condition attached to the loan opportunity. After 20 years of expanding cooperation, China is now Africa's largest trading partner. It is Africa's biggest foreign direct investor and its most prolific financier. Beijing's financial outlays on the continent remain significant and its presence on the continent looms large. There is no doubt that China has pursued its own opportunities, its own benefits in Africa. It has increased its soft power, is quenching its significant thirst for mineral resources, is flexing its military muscles, and expanding the market for Chinese goods in Africa. The global consulting firm McKinsey estimates over 10,000 Chinese-owned firms operate throughout Africa and values the Chinese business at more than $2 trillion since 2005. Now, what is our take at New Africa Profile? China's involvement with Africa could be beneficial. However, the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is servant to the lender. There is rarely a free lunch, and if it seems too good to be true, it probably is not. Institutions such as the IMF and World Bank are funded by the West and do not have a moral platform in Africa to cry foul about the East's relatively new role on the continent. Their terms are very much more stringent, and African debts to them outweigh those to China by far. However, Africa's embrace of China's generosity must be cautious and it must be measured. We must not sell the birthright of generations to come for a morsel of bread in times of hunger. Thank you so much.